So I'm going to go ahead and do this questionnaire that Stefan started because he's always starting crap with the group and all the other groups. We all have to follow along. Just kidding. So, what is the first game that you've played? That was a long time ago. I'm an old man. I would say that the first game I played was probably something on the Atari. I can remember River Raid was one of my favorites as a kid. There was also Pac-Man, probably Pac-Man. That's probably what it was. I think that was almost everybody's first game at one time. I get this really weird glare on my glasses, so I'm trying not to. It's kind of distracting. So I'd say probably Pac-Man is the first game I played. The first game console that I owned, Atari 2600, definitely. No doubt about that one. I can remember getting that, I think, from my cousins and taking it home and playing that as much as I could. Although they also had a Commodore 64, which I did play. There's one game on it. It basically, you put in your height and your weight, and you put yourself on other planets, and it told you what your height and weight was on that planet. For some reason, it was really fun, but looking back now, it's probably pretty lame. What is your first favorite game? Probably my first favorite game, the one that I really, really got into gaming with, is probably Dragon Warrior. And the reason that it's probably my favorite is because it was my first probably real RPG game. Take off these because it's really getting annoying. It was the first RPG game that I played, and wasn't really sure what I was doing. I had no idea about leveling up HP, magic points, and so on from there. I remember the slimes were probably my favorite enemy because they were the first one that I faced, and they were pretty easy compared to the rest until I leveled up. And then I met up with the metal slimes, which were like the flan of the days. They were almost impossible to kill until later on when I was more leveled up. There's also a golem in a broken down castle that gave me a lot of heartache. So that was probably my first favorite game, and from there moved on, of course, to the Final Fantasy series. Phantasy Star was another one as well. What was the first game that you pre-ordered? I can't see my screen, so I gotta get closer because my glasses are off. The first game that I pre-ordered, really? That's a tough one because I would say probably Kingdom Hearts 1.5. Never really been a big one for pre-ordering games because I've never really had to have one the day of release. So that's probably what that was. I know it's pretty lame, especially with my gaming history, but it is what it is. What is your favorite game or game series? That's another tough one. I could say that it's Final Fantasy, followed by Kingdom Hearts, although they're probably tied for a place. But also tied with that would be Phantasy Star, because that was just something that I played at the time. It was a different way of playing Final Fantasy for me. It was more futuristic than going back in time like Final Fantasy did. Especially Phantasy Star 3, where you actually had some generations that you could play through, and you could kind of choose the outcome of the next generation depending upon who married who at the end of the first generation. It was a pretty sweet game. But then there's also, of course, Super Mario Brothers, all the games in that franchise, Zelda. Then there is, there's so many out there. So I can't really say that I have a favorite game. My taste is pretty eclectic when it comes to games. So really, there just really isn't a favorite. It's really what I like at the time and what I play over and over again. So that's what it is. Okay, back to the close-ups. What are your top 10 games of all time? That's a tough one. I would say in no particular order. Clash of Demon Head is there. That's an awesome game. We've got, of course, Final Fantasy. I'll just choose the series as a whole because it's there. We've got Dragon Warrior 1, The Legend of Zelda 2, which I know a lot of people do not like, but it's actually one of my favorite Zeldas in the series. I'm going to go for, with Atari River Raid. It was a pretty simple game where you just flew planes through basically waterways, but it was a pretty challenging game for the time. So that's probably one of my favorites. Then we have ToeJam and Earl, which was a Sega Genesis game. That was actually a pretty fun game with the two aliens who landed their ship, and you have to find the pieces to it. Then Phantasy Star 1, 2, and 3. I've never really played beyond that, especially when it came to the MMO online version of it. Not something that I'm really into. I'm not an MMO fan. Then we have, gosh, this is getting kind of tough. Secret of Mana. That was a huge game that I used to play. And I'm actually going to play it probably after Final Fantasy VI on my iPhone. Willow was actually a really good game for Nintendo. That's one of my favorites of all time. Kind of a Zelda clone in a way, but it followed the movie, but it was still its own game. It was pretty cool. Faxanadu, as well as Battle of Olympus. Both of those are kind of a Zelda 2 clone, but again, they're really good standalone games that I highly recommend. And then I'll just say Mario Brothers in general, because there's a lot of different elements within the Mario Brothers series that you can definitely, there's something for everybody. It's not just a single platformer game. There's a lot of different ways of playing it, and you can choose the game that you like the best out of the series, and of course play through it from there. And the characters are pretty recognizable all across the board. Okay, so what is your favorite video game genre? I'm going to say RPGs in general, and the reason for that is because you aren't just going from point A to point B and 8.1, 8.2, 8.3 in between. You kind of choose your own fate in them. So if I want to play it on the hardest mode possible, then I can do so by defeating the least amount of enemies, buying the least powerful weapons, and so on from there. However, if I want to totally annihilate the game and show who's boss, I can do that as well. So that's probably why there's just even the same game over and over again. You can play it multiple different ways, still have the same outcome, but the difficulty to get there is much different. Okay. Favorite video game company developer. That's also a tough one. I could take the easy way out and say Square Enix because they make a lot of my favorite games. But I'm gonna say Nintendo overall. And not because I'm a Nintendo fanboy or anything. My consoles are pretty eclectic with what I've got. I actually need to make a new video showing them after I clean that room up because it's pretty trash right now. But they've got a lot of different titles within their collection, and it's pretty eclectic as well. So you are able to find something that any gamer likes. There's sports, there's platformers, there's some RPGs, there's action adventure. I mean, it's all there. And the great thing is the titles, they last throughout time. So if I played Super Mario Brothers 1, 20 years ago, and I play it today, it's still a great game. It does hold up to the test of time. And then you have, Super Mario Bros. 2, which was a completely different take on it, which I actually like better. I wish they would bring Warp back and the Dreamscape back and everything. But it is much different. So it's same concept, just so much so much more into it than what you would expect. So that's what my answer is. Um, what is your favorite video game soundtrack song? Um, Final Fantasy X soundtrack OST is definitely my overall favorite. Um, I really can't choose one single song from there that would be my favorite. Um, so I'll just say the entire album. A lot of times when I'm writing, I will play that soundtrack along with others. Actually, Legend of Zelda theme could be mixed into there as well, by the Super Unknown. If you haven't watched that, listen to that on YouTube. An amazing version. But when I'm writing, especially when I was writing Final Reverie, I listened to that quite a bit, and it was definitely something that got me through some of the tougher parts where, if it was an action sequence, I would listen to that and kind of get a feel for how I wanted that sequence to go and use the flow of the music to choreograph that in writing it, per se. And I do that a lot. Actually, I find that when I'm writing, I will use various songs. It could be a pop song, it could be a hard rock song. There's so many different genres out there that translate very well to piano and violin, and by playing those in the background as I'm writing, it actually helps the words flow a little bit better. All right. What is your favorite art style in a video game? Well, that's a tough one too, because I don't have one. I don't play a video game for the graphics, for the art. That's a bonus and it adds on to it. But if I'm playing TWUWY, The World Ends With You, the art style in that goes perfectly with the game, and I'm actually absolutely in love with that art style for that game. But playing Final Fantasy X with that art style, I don't think it would work so well for me. Whereas the art style in Final Fantasy X is pretty amazing for the game itself. But when I'm playing Mario Brothers, 1, 2, or 3, for example, the minimalized graphics in those are pretty spot on with what you would expect from the game. If we brought Mario in with the graphics of Waka or Titus, it's probably not going to work out so well. So not a big deal to me, but it's something that I can consider within the game itself as an added bonus. Okay, and what upcoming game are you most excited about? This one, I would probably say Final Fantasy 15. There's been so much hype around it since it was supposed to be Versus 13, and I'm pretty excited to see how they're going to take that concept and bring it away from the Final Fantasy 13 series and make it its own. So that's probably my most anticipated game at the moment. I could say 2.5, but in a way, Kingdom Hearts 2.5. But I've already played the games in that, so yes, I'm excited to see the new graphics and get the Final Mix components. Although I have Final Mix, I just haven't played them. And to see how that's developed, but it's not brand new to me. Same thing with Kingdom Hearts 3. I'm pretty excited about that one as well. But I think Final Fantasy 15 probably edges that one out just a little bit. Hopefully I have time to play both of them. But my schedule's been so insane lately that I don't know how soon I'll even get to it. Another reason I don't do a lot of pre-orders because, right now I'm, of course, working 9-hour shifts at work, plus an hour drive there and back, so that takes me to 11 hours. I write for theinquisitor.com, so that's usually about an hour a day for 2 articles on average. I am a writer, so that is kind of sporadic. I could write for 10 minutes to get 100 words down and call it a day, or I could get to the flow of things and it could be a full day thing. For example, today I'm going to be editing a story for a Halloween anthology that I'm going to be in. We'll finish that probably within an hour and submit that, but then I'm going to start a new story for an anthology called Chunks, the Bart Pizarro anthology. I've not really stepped into the Bizarro world too much, so it's gonna be something new. So that one might flow because it's just gonna be weird and strange and all about puke. But it might be stuck there in my throat, and kind of like when you kind of have that puke right there and you swallow it back down, it just doesn't come out. Could be that. So we'll see how it goes. All right. What do you wish more people knew about you? Well, I don't really know that there's anything. Well, the light on my computer is doing this really weird thing. So um, I don't think there's really anything that I wish people knew more about me. I'm pretty much an open book. Ask me and I'll tell you. Um, I'm an ordained reverend just because I wanted to be. No religious affiliation really. Just thought it was cool to do. Um, so if anybody wants to get married, let me know. I can hook you up. Um, I was bored probably 8 or 9 years ago now, and I pierced my own nipples. So there's that. Obviously, I'm a writer. So I've published well, actually three books of my own, two with my publisher. The Guide to Being a Successful Facebook Admin is one book that I wrote kind of as a test for self-publishing. It's not that great, but I might go back to it and fix it later on to add to it and make it better. Final Reverie is my first novel, kind of heavily influenced by Final Fantasy and gaming. Currently working on the second book in the series, which is actually a prequel to it, called Abiding Reverie, and then I'll work on the third, which is a prequel to that. And I might actually do a fourth in the series, which is a sequel to Final Reverie. Although, if you read Final Reverie, who knows how? There's room for a sequel, but I don't know how it's going to happen. And I've also written a book called The ABCs of Zombie Friendship, which is a children's book teaching them ABCs. So that's something that it was a joke to start out with, but it grew into something big. So I'm pretty excited about it. Plus, I'm in about 24 anthologies currently. And I've got about 13 more that are waiting to be published, and I've got acceptances and contracts signed into. So, I'm really big on writing and literacy and so on. I'm also working toward my degree in psychology, so I will have my first degree in that in December. December 7th is actually the last day of my last class. So, working towards that as well. So, pretty busy schedule. When a new game comes out, do you pre-order it or wait until it's released or buy used? Typically, by the time I'm ready to start playing, it's something I'll buy used. Very seldom do I buy brand new. But I never really pre-order. It's very, very seldom that I do so. Just because I just won't have the chance to play it when it first comes out. So that's what that is. What consoles do you currently own? Gosh. I probably will forget some. I've got trying to go through the shelves in there. So I've got two DS's. We've got the pink and the red one. We've got the blue 3DS, 3DS XL, the Pokemon themed Game Boy Advance, I believe it is. Maybe that's a Game Boy Color. I can't remember offhand. But a Game Boy Advance, and then Neo Geo handheld, the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Famicom, Super Famicom, Sega Genesis, Sega CD, Sega Saturn, 3DO, Xbox 360, PS1, PS2, PS3, Neo Geo CD, Neo Geo cartridge, GameCube, N64, the green one and the black one, Ouya, Wii U, Wii, Commodore 64. There's so many more. I just can't remember them offhand. I think last count we had 52 game consoles. The original Kong. So as you can see, there's probably too many to even mention right now. What video games? Well, actually, let's go back here. What game is your current guilty pleasure? Um, Probably the. It just look creepy. Thought I'd do it. Probably Mario Kart Wii U right now, or Sonic All Stars Racing. Both are different, but both are pretty awesome right now. So myself and Vivica have been playing those pretty frequently, and so that's probably my guilty pleasure. Although the iOS versions of our releases of Final Fantasy have been probably one of my most guilty pleasures right now with gaming because they're always there on the go. Currently playing Final Fantasy IV, the After Years. I'm on the last portion of the game, and I've kind of stalled that one for a while, so I need to go back to it and finish it. And then I'll go into Final Fantasy VI because I've already played 5 on there. And then from there, I'll play Secret of Mana. So that's probably where that is on there. I wish they would redo Dragon Warrior 1 and 2 at least on there, but we'll see where that goes. But that's probably my current guilty pleasure, unless you want to include Candy Crush, which for some reason I just keep going back to. What video game series have you been following for the longest? Probably Mario Brothers would be the one, just by default. But Final Fantasy would probably be tied there with it, and as well as Zelda. I guess those are probably the 3 that I follow the longest. Who is your favorite antagonist? This is another tough one. I would say my favorite antagonist is probably going to be. That's a really tough question because there's so many good games out there with so many great antagonists. I can tell you that it's not Seymour from Final Fantasy X. He's a great antagonist, but he's not nowhere near the best. Sephiroth, no, because he's integral to the story. He is a great antagonist, but there's something lacking there that doesn't. He's just not the best for that. Ganon, again, not really the best, although he is one of the classics. Wow, I don't know on this one. Bowser again, integral to the series, but not the greatest. I really don't have an answer to this one. I guess if I were to choose, I'm going to say, I'll go back to that one. My favorite protagonist in any game. It might seem that I'm jumping on the bandwagon here per se, but I will have to say Tidus from Final Fantasy X. And the reason I say that is because he's also an antagonist in a way, and maybe that's my favorite antagonist too, because he's his own worst enemy. He has a lot of depth to him as a character, so he really wants to do well, but his relationship with his father has really pushed him into an area where he's his own worst enemy, where he pushes people away per se. He doesn't really realize his own downfalls, and they tend to defeat him in emotionally and so on. And then in the end, when he finally has things figured out, or so he thinks he does, he finds out he's basically not even real, and he just kind of fades away off into nothingness. So all this time that he could have been enjoying himself, his life, and others around him, he let that go. So favorite antagonist and protagonist, same guy, Tidus, no doubt. I would really like to see a future game, maybe a Final Fantasy X-3. I know the rumors have been out there, and the rumors have been horrible. And if you believe in them, crawl back under your rock. But I'd love to see a a third version where he joins the team, and it takes it kind of back to where we were in the original, but maybe starts in a realm where he's with Jecht and Auron, and maybe he's traveling with the three of them to get back to reality per se, and from there to reintroduce a new sin, maybe something much bigger than before, and bring that out, meet up with Yuna and Wakka and the whole team, and just make it a much more vast and openscape game. That would be a dream where he has a chance to face his demons, where he's fighting alongside with Jecht, and they get to fight it out themselves and go through and build upon that story, and build upon where I think Final Fantasy X-2 was lacking, although that would be like an essential in between. I kind of think of X-2 as the Britney Spears, Miley Cyrus of the Final Fantasy X series. Kind of went weird and strange, but is maybe essential for further growth. That's what I like to see. What are your favorite features in video games? Character customization, real-time action, 3D graphics, etc. Again, it really depends on the game. It really doesn't matter to me, per se, because I play for the story and so on. But I would say my favorite features are going to be, when it comes to character customization in RPGs, choosing your weaponry. I like when video games started to actually show you the different weapons. I remember in the first Final Fantasy that as you would change a weapon from a dagger to a sword, you would actually see the change. Unfortunately, you wouldn't see armor changes or anything like that. So I like when your outfit, not really outfit, but your accessories physically change in there, so you can get a feel for what the character feels as well. And that could also impact gameplay. If I buy a new armor and it's super powerful and so on, but you put it on and it looks horrible, will you keep it on just because of the power, or will it be something you just keep in your inventory and hide away until it's absolutely necessarily needed? So that's kind of what I'm looking at there. Real-time action, I prefer turn-based, just because it gives you time to strategize and think. Although in Final Fantasy XII, as well as Kingdom Hearts series, real-time seems to work very well. So I'm not opposed to it. I just prefer turn-based. 3D graphics really don't matter to me. I could care less. I think that cutscenes in 3D or HD or whatever you happen to have, I think that's pretty awesome, because it kind of gives you a vision of what the creators wanted for the characters, but it also allows you to use your imagination throughout the rest of the game. Other features, it's something we take for granted now, but save feature. Back in the day, we never had save features. We used to have to put in these things called passwords, and sometimes they were like as big as my head. And basically, there would be a jumble of letters and numbers, sometimes shapes, and you'd have to write them down. If you wrote them down incorrectly, then all your saved information was completely lost, and that sucked. So, the save feature with multiple save slots. I can't tell you how many times I've saved a game on block number 1, come back a week later to find out one of my kids or somebody else has saved their game over my game. So I usually choose something a little bit later, 97, 98, 99, so it's down at the bottom of the list. But that's probably my favorite feature in a game, because it makes things so much easier. Alright, so I'm just going to say this because Stefan said it, but all video examples found in this video belong to their respective owners, not me, and they're only used for demonstrative purposes only. No profit was made from this video. Although I'm not going to show you any examples of video games because I don't feel like editing this. So I guess that's pretty much it. I don't really have any other questions, but I love coffee. So